It's Mike with the Quit Sugar Summit. How are you? Really excited. My buddy, my new friend that we've been 2 or 3 summits in a row here, Julia Ross, is back, and by popular demand, I might add, because people are really curious about her books and the work that she does with amino acids. And she's the author of The Mood Cure, The Diet Cure, and most recently, The Craving Cure. And she has another book coming out in September, which she might talk about if you're lucky. And it's just this, I don't understand. We talk, Julie and I talk on the phone a lot, and I'm trying to figure out why, with her research and her books, that folks don't understand this available over-the-counter amino acids can be so valuable and helpful in getting off carbs and sugar and even drugs and alcohol, which she'll tell you a little bit about. It's kind of how she got started in all this. But I'm going to let her tell the story. She's, given this one-on-one to more than 5,000 people, and just literally can see it in front of their faces, and has testimonials from a decade ago, probably. So anyway, Julia, how are you? Thanks for doing this. I really appreciate it. Always great to talk with you.
Well, I'm glad to talk to you again and talk about my favorite subject.
And it's wonderful. I mean, it's like, I've actually tested this stuff on different people, and it just helps them so much. And so go back and, tell us about it. Tell us the story of how this evolved. I know it's kind of an interesting story, and it's kind of got a few twists and turns, and how you came to write these books and understand this process and help a lot of folks. So just go back as far as you need to tell the folks about it.
Okay, well, let me begin by saying that my formal training is as a psychotherapist.
Okay.
So I have a master's degree in clinical psychology, and during the internship phase of my master's program, at the very end, I got an internship at an alcoholism treatment program, long-term residential in a 3-story Victorian on a hill in San Francisco, given carte blanche. They said, we don't know what to do. All we have is this protective house, 3 meals a day, and a lot of personal support and 12-step meetings. Mm-hmm. We hear that there's a lot of exciting stuff happening in this new clinical psychology that's replacing Freudian psychology. Could you please see what it would do if we add it to what we've already got? Mm-hmm. Well, nobody could turn that down. Nobody in my position, new to the field, a new psychotherapist, learning all these, so excited about these new techniques. And so we did that. A group of 4 of us came from the graduate program right into this treatment program, and we just had the best time. And so did our residents. They loved it. We did like 4-hour groups because we just couldn't leave. We loved it so much. And we continued to do that and increase the beauty of the program. We did family work. We did early childhood family sculpting workshops. We did video therapy. We did, we really gave it everything we had and everything that was available. It was a nonprofit, so there was no profit motive, to minimize the quality of the work. But after about 2 years, the first study of results, the relapse rate study, came out. And we found that we were getting, with our 100% alcoholic population, 50% relapse rates. At the time, we were appalled. What were we missing? Within 2 years, 50% sounded really good, because the crack cocaine epidemic had burst into flame nationwide, and all of us, no matter what we were doing, were getting 100% relapse rates in 24 hours. Mm-hmm. By this time, I was the director of a new outpatient program. So if residential programs were getting 100% relapse rate, you can imagine what happened in an outpatient program where we didn't have the structure and support and so forth. So that was devastating. And all of us who ran treatment programs in San Francisco at that time were devastated. We were all considering leaving the field. You know, we didn't know what to do. We couldn't help our people anymore. And at that moment, we saw a light at the end of the tunnel because we began to attend some conferences that were put on by addiction specialist neuroscientists who were telling us about the brain chemistry of addiction, whether it was alcohol or cocaine. The brain chemistry was very clear by then. This is now the middle, late 80s.
Mm-hmm.
What we were told was that we had been wrong to consider emotional and spiritual causes of addiction to be primary. That the primary cause was brain chemistry deficit. In other words, the areas of the brain, there are only 5 areas of the brain that transmit natural pleasure, natural excitement, natural ability to have fun and enjoy life, to relax, to have hope, even in dark times. We're equipped with that genetically, to have a brain that functions well and produces all those things. But once we start using addictive substances, all of that beautiful brain, natural brain chemistry gets distorted. And they described these substances as brain intoxicants. So what happens when we take, when we take cocaine, when we drink, whatever, when we eat sugar? I'll get into that later because that was a later understanding, a more recent understanding about how sugar affects the brain. But what happens is that these 5 centers that should be producing all this great mood support can't. They are blown up. The drugs, the alcohol are like bombs that blow up and force a release of all of our pleasure chemistry at once, which is very exciting and wonderful, except that it ends up depleting the source. So that after that, we don't have even what we had before, our natural ability to have, a sense of well-being is just shot. And the more it's shot, the more we want the substances that are going to blow up whatever's left. And that's why so many people in addiction say, you know what, I just want to go back to where I was before I started drinking. I can't feel even that good anymore. So they explained something that we'd never understood before, exactly what is it in the brain? What do these substances do? They knew. They had it in living color, literally, with images. So then the question was, well, what do we do about it? We aren't brain scientists. We are stuck. But we know at least what we're up against, and we can educate our people and look for solutions. Well, the next thing we knew, the next conference included a neuroscientist named Kenneth Blum, who told us the following. He said, any boob who studies college-level biochemistry knows that the 5 pleasure centers in the brain are fueled by just a handful, literally 5 nutrients. And they're all proteins or amino acids. So they're the components of protein. The more protein we eat, the more fuel we have for these 5 brain sites and, for muscle and an infinity of other bodily functions that protein serves. But all we cared about was the 5, what are these 5 things? Well, his first research using supplements of these protein fragments, these amino acids, were stunning. And his first efforts were with cocaine addicts because that was the worst addiction we were facing. And he was able to bring AWOL rates down from 40%. These people would come into a hospital program, pay $10,000 up front, non-refundable, and leave within a week. So he said, look, you have nothing to lose. Let's just put everybody on this one amino acid and see if it makes any difference. 3 months later, they calculated the relapse rates, 4%. It had gone from 40% to 4%. So at least they were sticking out treatment. Their cravings had been reduced enough they could handle the 28 days.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that was enough for me and for a lot of the...
What was the one?
The one in that case was tyrosine.
Okay. Go ahead.
So that's the naturally stimulating amino acid that creates a little family of mood enhancers, dopamine, norepinephrine, and adrenaline, which give us the juice.
Mm-hmm.
We tried it on our first client, an African-American former bodybuilder who had used amino acids to build muscle because it's most famous for that. And he was about to lose his job, his family, his housing, everything, because, you know, he was on his third probation and they could throw the book at him and he was gone. And he really was finally against the wall. We gave him tyrosine at the doses, you know, approximate doses that Dr. Blum had used. We told him to take it 3 times a day. We sent him home with some. He had an appointment in a week. And we waited till he showed up. And first of all, he showed up, which was amazing in those days for a crack addict. That's A. B, he said, I don't believe it. You're not going to believe it. My family doesn't believe it. Neither does my boss. But I've been clean for a week.
Nice.
And it hasn't even been that hard. So that was all we needed to know. We started using it with everybody because I already had a nutritionist on staff, but diet alone wasn't doing it. We thought it would. And probably in the pre-crack days it would have, but it wasn't enough. Giving it more protein was not enough. So then we began to look at Blum's further work on alcohol addiction and finally on food addiction. And we began to utilize the other 4 amino acids that were known to fuel these 5 brain sites. So then we had, you know, the stars in the crown. We had all 5 brain sites covered, and pleasure, comfort, the most common cause of food addiction, by the way, turned out to be endorphin deficiency. So an inability to feel comforted, an inability to feel pleasure in life, the pleasure in life that we were actually genetically programmed to feel. You know, in the old days, when I grew up, a lot of people whistled and sang as they went along. You know, they just felt good for no reason. The garbage man was whistling.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So, but, you know, but addicts in particular are sometimes low to begin with, and as they use, whether it's sugar, bread, you know, chocolate, whatever, that and those endorphin producing cells just lose it. They can't provide it on a regular basis, so they have to be drugged. They have to have frequent infusions of drugs, and that's where the food industry came in. And that's where we started seeing all the new eating disorders and all the new compulsive eating problems and the weight gain. So that by 2000, we had an announcement of an obesity epidemic. That was no accident. Our diet had changed because the fast food manufacturers had figured out how to intoxicate us with food. Forget about alcohol and drugs.
Right.
And so now, of course, the neuroscientists have been keeping up with it. Better imagery, more studies, and they're telling us, you know, the results of studies like the famous M&M study. M&Ms being the top-selling candy in the world.
Right.
Okay, so they did a study. What do M&Ms do? Well, M&Ms go right to the site of the super endorphins, called enkephalins, in case you care, and increase their output by 150%, exactly equal to the increase in our natural painkillers, the endorphins, that we can get if we take opium.
Wow. Wow.
So, we have been confirmed over time. The head of the National Institute on Drug Addiction, Nora Volkow, a neuroscientist, confirms that food addiction is exactly equivalent to alcohol and drug addiction in terms of the 5 areas of the brain that are impacted. And one of your other speakers, Joan Ifland, let us know at the Alliance for Addiction Solutions, an organization I helped found, and she spoke there and talked to us about how the tobacco industry in the 80s began to buy up the food industry. Right. And they had already figured out how to use sugar to create more severe addictions to tobacco. So it was an obvious next step. As their tobacco sales dropped because, of the lawsuits and the exposures of the tobacco industry, they had a new place to go and practice, their
addiction.
Their addiction
marketing,
food production.
Right.
So, long and the short of it is we got a handle on every kind of addictive substance. And so we had a chemical dependency protocol, depending on the substance.
Mm-hmm.
We had a food addiction protocol. And to some extent, it depended on which substances they were, is it bread or is it chocolate? It's always sugar, and usually sugar combined with dough. So we began to learn which areas of the brain different foods would light up. And we developed a really reliable, and it's on the Craving Cure website, questionnaire, 5-part questionnaire, to let you know what part of the brain is malfunctioning in my case because of my use of sugar and other foods or other addictive substances.
Mm-hmm.
Very reliable, 0 to 10 scale. Everybody comes into our Craving Cure virtual clinic.
Mm-hmm.
And before the virtual clinic started in 2014, we had a bricks and mortar clinic, starting in the late 80s. Mm-hmm. So we've got thousands of people, thousands of documentation of these questionnaires, people coming in with all 10s, in at least 2 categories and often all 5 categories. Mm. And we know just what to give them. They start taking them on day 1. Actually, now we trial them right away. We give them 1 of each that they need. They chew it up so that it gets a real fast absorption in the mouth. And they and we can see what it does. Mm. And that means they're totally motivated because they can feel it. They know that it's worth getting the bottle of whatever supplement of the 5 it is and taking it. And it's just self-perpetuating because not only do they lose their cravings within 24 hours typically. This is food cravings I'm talking about. But you helped me understand in our conversation a couple of weeks ago that I need to tell people that it also stops withdrawal symptoms. Mm. So when we first started treating eating disorders, bulimia specifically, and binge eating, we had people go through withdrawal for 12 weeks. They were eating well. They did it cold turkey. They were eating well. But that's all we had, and to deal with the brain issues, which we didn't really understand at that time. So as we added amino acids to the protocol of, they were doing OA, they were doing a lot of counseling with us, individual, family, group. Okay, they got better and better, and the withdrawal got shorter and shorter. Until now, there is no withdrawal. We ask them, are you uncomfortable now that you've lost your cravings and stopped eating immediately? No. Some of them have never really tried to stop, so they didn't know how bad withdrawal could be, but most of them have tried many, many times.
Wow. Now that's the part that really lights me up, is that people can walk out of this, and because that's why they can't get to the other side, I think, because it's nastier than you think. Tell the folks about the folks that did it without. You were like a pioneer in the food recovery world. Tell the folks what the withdrawals were like before you started bringing
Well,
them.
let me give the real background, which was when I grew up in the 50s and 60s, there was no obesity really.
Right.
There was no diabetes at all.
Right.
Just have people sort of let that sink in, and everybody listening to this. So we had genetically programmed body types, just like genetically programmed eye color. We all knew that there was some variation among us, and we expected that. Nobody was, self-traumatized or criticized by anybody else for having whatever their body shape was. So into that, eternal picture, we'd always had particular body shapes and nobody ever thought anything about it. Our main problem was getting enough to eat. But, starting in the 40s, we had enough to eat. The Depression was over. We were eating. Everybody was strong and vital. As I say, people were singing, whistling as a, natural part of life. Anyway, our brains were well fueled. And then we started in the 70s getting the junk food epidemic going. And then people started dieting, which then starves the brain. So we're starved on the junk food, which is mostly sugar, no protein, speak of. And then we diet and we alternate. And that is just a fatal scenario for the 5-part brain chemistry concert we should be playing all the time.
Right.
So I got into the addiction field at about the same time as we were realizing there was a whole new kind of addiction, and it was food addiction. And the OA, which was a very small organization initially, ballooned. And one of my counselors was in OA, and she said, please start a counseling program. That nobody's doing this. They don't recognize it, even though there's OA. They don't recognize it's a real addiction. And I said, well, what is it? I didn't know. But I went to meetings with her and I said, yes, let's see what we can do. Wow. As soon as we started getting the aminos, we started doing a lot better. I mean, with 12 weeks of withdrawal, we didn't get people sticking around too long.
Yeah.
Among our food addicts. So the word got out. And we started seeing a lot of people, and it became evident that everything we did was important. The counseling was important. There was a lot of trauma, including sexual trauma, among our bulimic clients, for example. However, they hung in there through the counseling process like nobody's business once we got their brain chemistry organized with the amino acids. Okay. And this is an important thing. Nobody takes the aminos permanently. You take the amino acids, they eliminate the cravings, and then you're eating really well. You're getting plenty of protein. You don't need those extra amino acids to maintain the vitality of this 5-part system that makes your life worth living, right. And cuts off cravings.
Unbelievable. Julia, you and I have had the same discussion many times. It's like, how do we get this information out more? It's so interesting to me that the people that I know that have tried this and worked this program, it works very well. I'm really kind of curious about these 12 weeks of withdrawals, to cut that short for sure. And obviously you've seen a lot of people in that time period.
Yeah. And so, well, we've seen, about 6,000 plus. I do professional trainings. So health professionals take my training. They learn how to add amino acid therapy to whatever they're already doing, whether it's psychotherapy, dietary counseling, naturopathy, whatever.
Yeah.
And so we have all of those records too, because
Mm.
they have to keep the records of how do your people do? Oh, they take the questionnaire every week for 12 weeks. And what happens? They feel better and better and better and better every week for 12 weeks instead of worse and worse and worse.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's amazing. Yeah, I mean, originally thought it could be done in 30 days, but I think it takes longer. It just, without a supplementation of some sort. So,
of course, yeah. I think people need to know it is not their fault. It is not a lack of discipline. It is not a lack of motivation. It is a lack of neurotransmitters. That's the name of these 5 brain chemicals. And maybe it's time to say what they are.
please.
Some of them are well known now. I've talked about endorphin. Okay, that's the number one. Endorphin deficiency is the number one cause of food craving. So let's start with that. Endorphin is our natural opiate.
Yeah.
It's our natural ability to kill pain and experience pleasure in life. Okay, so there's that. Then there's another very well-known one, our natural antidepressant, serotonin. Our inner sunshine makes us feel hopeful, optimistic, unafraid, confident, and it too relieves cravings. When we eat because we're fearful, anxious, depressed, that's eating because our serotonin levels are too low. So we know the supplement that will fix the endorphins and our natural opiate. We know how to fix serotonin naturally, so that if people are not satisfied with their antidepressant drug, and all of those target serotonin, there's a natural alternative. And if they are having difficulty or disappointment with their antidepressant drug, there's a very simple way of transferring, reducing the antidepressant and raising the natural amino acid, and leaving the antidepressant behind. And that is something that I talk about in a complete chapter in my book, The Mood Cure,
Okay.
which is been a tremendous seller, because nobody just has cravings. They're eating because they're miserable too.
Right.
There's that urge, the gut urge to have it, but there's also, I know if I have it, I'm not going to feel so depressed. I'm not going to feel so anxious and stressed, especially now in COVID, that stress reducing effect of drug-like food.
You think it's conscious or unconscious, that feeling that you're describing? Or both?
I think it's both. It depends on the person.
Yeah.
And how severe the mood problems are that are caused by the neurotransmitter deficiencies.
Okay.
Some people just feel the urge to eat, and all they know is that they feel pleasure then, and that's
Yeah, they don't think it through. Yeah.
But now in COVID, people are really identifying that they're eating more specifically because of stress. So what if we got for the stressed people, the stressed eaters? We have our natural tranquilizer, which is called GABA. Gamma aminobutyric acid is the long version. GABA is what it's known, it's referred to in science as well as at our clinic, and it makes us instantly relax. The shoulders drop, the neck stops being tight, and we stop wanting something to eat to stave off the feelings of stress. So amazingly enough, GABA is actually available itself over the counter.
Right. A lot of the stuff that you're talking about is over the counter supplements.
It's all over the counter.
There you go. Yeah.
It's all over the counter. It's not even expensive over the counter.
Right.
You don't have to buy the most expensive, private labeled stuff in the world. You can go anywhere, and pretty much the quality, with a few exceptions, which I talk about in my books, The Craving Cure and The Mood Cure, the quality is very high, uniformly high. So we've now taken care of 3 of the 5, right? So what have we got left? We've got our natural energy for people who crave chocolate, caffeine with their sugar. Those people are looking for a boost. They're looking for focus. They're looking for vitality. And there's the amino acid we mentioned before that works for cocaine addiction and meth addiction and caffeine addiction. And it's just great for people who crave chocolate, which is our most stimulating food, addictive food. So if a food addict gets a feeling of energy, focus, vitality from whatever they're eating, that means that food is lighting up the what we call the CATs, short for the catecholamines, our natural energizers. And what we give them is what I mentioned earlier when you asked it, is tyrosine, or something very similar that's, for some people, tyrosine is even a little too strong, even though it's just a natural protein. Oh, you're one of those. Okay. Yeah. So first of all, if we ask people, are you sensitive to any supplements? Have you ever had an adverse effect specifically from an amino? And we tell them the 5 names of the aminos, and they'll, so you would say, yeah, tyrosine was no good for me, made me more agitated, or, usually that kind of thing. And so then we say, well, let's trial a quarter of a capsule. And sometimes that's the ticket. But there are some people that even a quarter of a capsule is just, it doesn't feel good. So then, fortunately, we have an alternative amino acid that's much gentler and also does other wonderful things, including support the endorphins. So we'll try that. So we have, some repertoires for each situation. So then the final situation is a deficiency of blood sugar. Cravings that are caused by low blood sugar. We skip meals. We eat nothing but junk food so that our blood sugar is yo-yoing up and down. And when it drops too low, there's like an emergency response in the brain which says, eat sugar now. And that's true of diabetics too. Their initial problem is high blood sugar, but particularly when they start needing medication, they can plunge very deep. And in fact, low blood sugar kills type 1 diabetics. So in the brain, there is no extra fuel lying around. If there's not enough glucose, that's a code red. And we have to eat sugar or high starch foods immediately. So what do we do instead? We use the amino acid glutamine. So glutamine is a miracle for hypoglycemia. In fact, the founder of the Hypoglycemia Foundation, after she'd interviewed me on the foundation website, said, Julia, are you saying that glutamine is the cure for hypoglycemia? She'd spent her life trying to help people understand, A, that they had it, and B, how to eat differently to fight it. Well, you have to eat differently to fight it for sure, but if you can't do that, you're going to continue to be hypoglycemic until you get some glutamine in your system. So the answer to her was yes.
She actually told that story. She's on the summit. We dedicated the summit to her for her 40 years of work, and she actually told that story.
She did?
Yeah.
Oh, Roberta.
Yeah.
Wonderful. I mean, not everybody listens to this, as you know. Right. If everybody was listening to this,
right.
I've written 3 books,
right, and
they've all done really well.
Yeah.
They would be all over the world, and it will be.
No, it's going to be. I guarantee it. Now, let's drill into this a little bit, because I'm flummoxed myself as to why this isn't. And you and I talked about a single supplement, a one way that people, an easy pill, but there are some what do they call them, co-occurring things, comorbidities. There's a little bit of, you got to research it. You have 5 types that people are. They take the questionnaire. Do you think that maybe they give up after a while? Because you would think that people would be singing this from the rooftop and the books would be passed all over like the best word of mouth advertising on the planet. What do you think it is? I mean, just kind of gut feeling, what do you think it is? And, we want to help you break it and get it out to everybody.
Well, I think it's a number of things. For one thing, the pharmaceutical industry was also jumping on this information, about the brain chemistry at the same time. And they have lots more money for
and
PR,
prescription pads, right? Yeah.
So that was a block, and initially the psychiatrists were on board with this because they were already using tryptophan to naturally raise serotonin levels, and finding it was wonderful, and their patients loved them for giving it to them and so forth. So that they weren't interested when Prozac and the other antidepressants at first came around, but then a very bad batch of this particular amino acid came out, and it was really made a lot of people sick, and it scared the medical profession, and they have really never recovered. So they went for the drugs which they were more comfortable with, in general.
Right.
To begin with. So that's one thing that happened. We got very distracted about, hey, we can use drugs to fix our brain, right?
Yeah, I mean, the SSRIs are selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, right? I mean,
they've been very disappointing, though, in terms of eliminating craving.
Right.
So, and NIDA, the National Institute of Drug Addiction, they've been doing nonstop research to try and discover drugs that will stop cravings for addictive substances, and they've now, of course, included sugar among them, and they have had no luck either. So,
and you have it in all your books. It's making me crazy. Yeah. I'm telling you, this is making me crazy. I can't really, like I said, I mean, if something happens, like, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like Tim Ferriss's stuff, right? The word of mouth goes crazy, right? And that's for like, I don't know, whatever, all of his books. But that's why I'm thinking that there's got to be like something in there that people are holding back, giving it to their friend or something. You know what I mean? That word of mouth, that next step in the, they're fairly successful books. They've sold well.
Well, let's talk about that. The Mood Cure, my second book, the Diet Cure is still selling nicely, but the Mood Cure is a publishing phenomenon, and that's where people are giving the book to their friends.
Okay.
And calling us and emailing us. This is almost 20 years that the Mood Cure has been out, and we still get emails and calls every week saying, "This saved my life," because it isn't only food addicts. But other drugs of addiction and people, experiencing significant depression, anxiety, and so forth.
Yeah.
So even now, almost 20 years later, every 60 seconds, there's somebody taking the Mood Cure questionnaire on the Mood Cure website.
Yeah.
And because of that, the publisher asked me to do a 20-year revision. So that's coming out this fall.
Okay.
And I've added 3 chapters to it. One of them on hypoglycemia, and which includes not just food cravings, but major negative moods, including rage and violence. So it really belongs in there.
Gotcha. Dr. Lustig thinks this is a tectonic shift, and the awareness is just being lifted, and we've got to get this one solution out there because people are interested in I can't even imagine all the vitamins they take that might be a waste for no, I don't think there's a lot of scientific evidence for that, but this would actually help them in such a more positive way,
a more obvious way. We were used to giving people vitamins, but we never noticed much.
Right.
We just knew that in a subtle way they were getting more of what they were probably lacking. But it's obvious, when we do the trialing, it's obvious in less than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And really the need is so horrendous, and forget about obesity, you know,
Yeah.
bad enough, but we've got, you know, completely out of control diabetes. In this country, it's 50%. In China, it's 70%. In India, it's 80%
Mm.
of the population.
Right.
It is not necessary. Diabetes is a completely brain chemistry caused
Right.
death sentence.
Yes. Right. Amazing. Amazing. So what question am I not asking, Julia Ross? What other stuff that you want to get out there that I may have missed or you think is important? That's something that is on your mind or in the new book, or tell us, you know,
Well,
what are you thinking about?
Well, we have talked about COVID-19,
Yeah. Okay.
but very little.
Yeah.
And when we talked last, it was not happening.
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
So I think that would be really important to just focus on for a minute. And in that regard, I want everybody to be aware that the free gift that we're contributing to this
Yeah.
summit is what we're calling the amino aid packet. It's like first aid for those whose cravings are going even further out of control during COVID, whose moods are plummeting. So the thinking behind this, you know, when COVID started, I thought, what can I do to help? You know,
Sure.
what can I send out, you know, that's going to make a difference? And you know, I thought, well, you know, the Craving Cure is a very new book. You know, it's already out there. But then I realized the Craving Cure is over 300 pages long, and it has fabulous information in it. I use it as a text to review before I give talks myself, and all my trainees, you know, earmark everything. But a lot of people just cannot pick it up and read it, you know, because they're too stressed, you know, they can't concentrate. And so what I did was to compress it into 5 pages. And each page has a link to a questionnaire or a list of supplements or a list of who should not take which amino acids. There are some that aren't good for people, for certain people. All of them are good for people, but there are certain people that shouldn't take all of them. Maybe they only need 1 or 2. So all of that is there compressed so that people can figure it out for themselves. They can take the questionnaire online. That leads them to what kind of amino acids. They get the information about the dosing for children, for teens, for adults. It's all compressed in there. And then if they find even that is too challenging, they can get craving coaching. My super experienced nutritionists are available virtually to consult with anybody who's got a problem with overeating.
Nice.
They're specialists. They never miss.
They never miss. That sounds really valuable. I appreciate you giving that out. That's awesome. So tell the folks, how do you see this playing out? I mean, you've been like a pioneer and you've been around the industry and helping people for many, many years. What, are we at a tipping point? Are we ready to get everybody the awareness out there? Will people start to understand that these high processed, ultra processed carbs are like drugs and that they're hurting people slowly, like a slow suicide?
Well, not if the food industry has its way.
Right, exactly.
They were on to me when I wrote my first book that came out in 2000.
Really?
Yes, I got a big phone call from one of the biggest cold cereal producers in the world.
Wow.
Yes, I do.
I always worry about that. I always like I always worry. Go ahead. I worry about that, but go ahead.
Well, he called this representative of this huge company, and I said, well, what makes you call me, you know? And he said, oh, we like to stay on the cutting edge. He said, but actually, I just have one question for you. However, before I ask you the question, I want to admit a few things so that we don't have to spend time arguing about our products.
Wow.
I will admit that we increase the amount of sugar on a regular basis.
You don't have a recording, do you?
Yeah, it's in my book, The Craving Cure. I tell the whole
Okay,
story.
good.
Okay, so then he said, we market to children through, these substances that we're making out of damaged fats and damaged starches. So in addition to the continually increasing amount of sugar, which makes it ever more addictive, this is on top of these damaged, cute little starch-created shapes. They have to really decimate flour in order to create these cute little shapes. And then, of course, they crisp it up with the fat, which is the cheapest and most damaging fat to be found, these damaged vegetable oils, like soy oil and corn oil and canola oil and so forth.
Wow.
So guess what his question was? He said, okay, so are we okay with that? I know that you would ask me about all that, but I want to admit that's true. But in addition to that, do you feel that our products are physically addictive? I said, well, you couldn't have read my whole book, The Diet Cure, and not know that that's how I feel. And there are some references in there, but I would be happy to get you more references. I would be even happier to put together a think tank to figure out, is there anything healthful we can put in those boxes? You would then be the hero of the nation, saving the children. No, he said, I'm too depressed by what you just said about it being physically addictive.
Wow. That's amazing. You heard it here first, folks. That's amazing.
So ever since then, I've said, if the food industry falls down on the job and this information gets out,
Right.
if something happens to me, you'll know why.
Right, exactly. I heard a story. One of our guys a long time ago, about 3 years ago, Damien Garmou, who wrote who did that sugar film down in Australia, said when he came to the United States, the sugar.org folks visited him in the green room of the television stations, told him what he should and couldn't say. I'm like,
wow.
Yeah.
He's someone who knows about the amino acids.
Yeah, he does. He's a good guy. He really is.
He is.
So tell the folks where they can find you online, Julia. This is amazing. And we're going to get folks over to your website and your books, and tell them about your books. And I'm sure they're all on Amazon, and you just got to type her name in, guys, Julia Ross, you'll find it. But tell them about the website and anything else you want to tell them where to find you.
Well, the website, Julia Ross Cures, is the name of it, .com. It's divided into the 3 sections, craving cure for the food cravers, the mood cure for when mood problems are really significant, for antidepressant alternatives, and for alcohol and drug addiction information. And then the diet cure is for something that we just touched on briefly, but it literally, I felt, it was my first book. I felt we needed a cure for low-calorie dieting, which was starving the brain chemistry that was the only thing that was going to keep us away from overeating. So anyway, so the eating disorders and the problems with dieting are really fully covered in the diet cure, and all that's very important, including how dieting suppresses the thyroid, which contributes to this epidemic of unnatural weight gain we're experiencing. And then on those, on each of those sections, there is information on how to find practitioners, whether it's our virtual craving clinic or my trained and certified practitioners who can help with mood problems and addictions, other addictions. So that's really where to go.
Awesome.
And anyone who was interested in getting trained, there's information about the trainings on the sites too.
Nice. Yeah, we get a lot of professionals who have never really heard of this information. So you might get some of those over there. Julia, you and I could geek out about this stuff for hours, and we have actually. So, but I really appreciate it because we have to kind of call it right here around an hour because folks they got a lot to watch. So I really appreciate you being here, and I like I said, I'm always game to help you figure out a way to get this information out to more people. So you
Well, thank you for both.
Yeah, you
Love
call me
being here,
anytime.
and we need to be united.
Right.
Anybody hearing this who has any ideas, get in touch with us.
There you go. Julia, take care. Thank you so much.
You too. All the best.
Bye-bye.